In a world buzzing with significant events and rapid transformations, it is crucial to stay informed about the shifts happening closer to home, particularly those affecting international relations and travel. Today, we delve into a topic causing growing concern among many: the changing dynamics at the United States-Canada border. For generations, crossing into the U.S. was almost an afterthought for Canadians. It represented freedom, open roads, and a shared sense of North American camaraderie. The process was typically straightforward, requiring minimal fuss, perhaps showing identification and answering a few basic questions. There were no visas to worry about, no significant hurdles, just an easy passage between two nations historically characterized by their friendly relationship. This ease of travel fostered deep economic and cultural ties, with Canadians frequently visiting for tourism, shopping, family visits, or business. The feeling was one of mutual trust and uncomplicated access. However, as we navigate the year 2025, a palpable difference hangs in the air at these border crossings. The once familiar simplicity seems to be evaporating, replaced by a more complex and, for some, unsettling experience. Travelers report encountering stricter procedures, including fingerprinting requirements at the border points. Personal electronic devices like phones and laptops are increasingly subject to searches, a practice that raises significant privacy concerns for many. The questioning by border agents feels longer, more probing, and the overall atmosphere is perceived by some as less welcoming, marked by colder looks and a diminished sense of assumed trust. The effortless, almost automatic confidence that defined the border crossing experience for decades appears to be diminishing, slipping away subtly but surely. What's particularly striking is that a large number of Canadians may not yet fully grasp the extent or the implications of these changes. Is this merely a tightening of security protocols in response to global uncertainties, a necessary measure in a changing world? Or does it represent something more profound, a quiet, unspoken signal that the relationship is shifting, that Canadians might no longer be viewed with the same implicit welcome they once took for granted? The distinction is crucial, affecting not just travel plans but the very perception of the Canada-US relationship. Stick around as we explore these developments in detail, because the evolving situation at the border could fundamentally alter how you travel and perceive our closest neighbor for the foreseeable future. We will break down the specific changes, explore the potential reasons behind them, and discuss the impact on individuals and the broader relationship. We encourage you to subscribe to our channel and hit the like button if you find this information valuable. It truly helps us bring important topics like this to a wider audience. Also, let us know in the comments where you are watching from. It is always insightful to see our global community. Stay with us as we unpack the new realities of crossing the U.S. border. Comprehensive conclusions will be presented at the end of this analysis. One of the most significant and perhaps surprising changes impacting Canadians, particularly those known as snowbirds who spend extended periods in the U.S. to escape the winter, is the implementation of what many are calling the 30-day rule surprise. Historically, the process for Canadians entering the United States for tourism or short visits was remarkably simple. For many years, Canadian citizens could stay in the U.S. for up to 6 months within any 12-month period without requiring a specific visa or extensive paperwork. This long-standing arrangement facilitated easy travel for leisure, family visits, and extended stays, especially for retirees heading south. It was a system built on a foundation of trust and the unique relationship between the two countries. The process was straightforward. Present your passport, answer standard questions about the purpose and duration of your visit, and typically, you were granted entry. This simplicity was a cornerstone of the cross-border experience for millions. However, the landscape began to shift noticeably. In the year 2025, this paradigm underwent a dramatic alteration. The familiar 6-month allowance seemed to vanish, replaced by a much stricter default limit. The new regulations stipulate that Canadians entering the U.S. are now generally limited to a stay of just 30 days, unless they take specific preemptive steps. To stay longer, Canadians must now proactively register their intended stay with U.S. immigration authorities online before their trip commences. This involves navigating a digital system, providing details about their travel plans, and essentially requesting permission for an extended stay, a stark contrast to the previous automatic allowance. This policy adjustment is officially framed as part of a broader initiative by U.S. authorities to more effectively track long-term visitors and manage immigration flows. The rationale often cited involves enhancing security and ensuring compliance with immigration regulations. However, the practical implications and the communication surrounding this change have caused considerable confusion and anxiety among Canadian travelers. A major contributing factor to the widespread unease is the lack of awareness. Many Canadians, accustomed to the decades-old norms, remain unaware of this significant 30-day limitation and the accompanying registration requirement. This information gap means that individuals might arrive at the border expecting the usual process, only to be confronted with unexpected restrictions or complications regarding their intended length of stay. Immigration lawyers specializing in Canada-U.S. border issues report a substantial increase in inquiries and cases stemming from this confusion. Clients are expressing surprise and concern, unsure how to navigate the new requirements or what documentation is needed for longer visits. Simultaneously, organizations representing Canadian snowbirds are actively lobbying U.S. authorities, seeking clarifications, exemptions, or at least a more streamlined process that acknowledges the traditional patterns of Canadian travel to the U.S. The impact of this rule is already becoming statistically evident. Data released by Statistics Canada indicated a notable decline in cross-border travel. Specifically, there was a reported nearly 32% drop in vehicle re-entries from the United States back into Canada in March, compared to the same period in the previous year. While multiple factors can influence travel statistics, this significant decrease coincides with the period following the implementation and growing awareness of the stricter stay limitations. Travelers themselves have started receiving warnings at the border or discovering upon entry that their permissible stay is much shorter than anticipated. Many are coming to the realization that the freedom to stay for extended periods, up to the previous 6-month mark, without facing bureaucratic hurdles, is no longer guaranteed. This realization forces a reassessment of long-term travel plans, property arrangements in the U.S., and the overall feasibility of the snowbird lifestyle for some. This change is far more than a mere administrative adjustment or the introduction of a new form. It represents a fundamental shift in how Canadian visitors are processed and perceived at the U.S. border. What was once an experience characterized by ease and implicit trust now feels more formalized, regulated, and potentially restrictive. The underlying question it raises is profound. Is the U.S. subtly recalibrating its stance towards its northern neighbors? Does this rule signal a move away from the historically unique open-door policy towards a more standard international visitor protocol? The feeling for many is that the border crossing is transforming from a smooth, almost effortless transition into something resembling a test of compliance, a test of preparedness, and perhaps a test of welcome. Are Canadians still genuinely embraced, or merely tolerated under stricter surveillance? This subtle but significant policy change is prompting many Canadians to rethink their travel habits and contemplate the evolving nature of the Canada-U.S. relationship, wondering when exactly the border began to feel less like a familiar threshold and more like a guarded gateway. Please remember to watch this video until the very end, as we will be summarizing these points and offering our conclusions on this evolving situation. Another deeply concerning development that has emerged at the U.S.-Canada border in 2025 involves the increasing practice of searching personal electronic devices, fundamentally altering the expectation of privacy for travelers. For decades, crossing the border was primarily about verifying identity and intentions through passports and verbal declarations. Personal belongings might be inspected, but the digital contents of one's phone or laptop were generally considered private territory. The process felt routine. Show your passport, answer a couple of questions truthfully about your trip, and proceed on your way. The focus was on physical goods and the traveler's stated purpose. However, the current environment marks a significant departure from this norm. Things have taken a decidedly more invasive turn. Now, upon arrival at U.S. border points, Canadians are increasingly being asked by Customs and Border Protection, CBP, officers to hand over their personal electronic devices. This includes smartphones, laptops, tablets, and any other device capable of storing digital information. What is particularly alarming is the legal authority granted to these agents. Under current U.S. law, CBP officers possess the legal right to search the contents of these electronic devices without needing a warrant or establishing probable cause, a standard typically required for searches within the country. This means agents can scroll through text messages, examine photos and videos, review web browsing history, and even inspect social media accounts and applications installed on the device. Crucially, travelers generally have no legal right to refuse such a search at the border. Refusal can lead to denial of entry or seizure of the device. This new reality of digital searches at the border has, understandably, raised serious privacy concerns among Canadians and civil liberties advocates. The expectation that personal communications, private photos, sensitive data, and online activity would remain confidential during a border crossing has been significantly eroded. The issue gained further prominence after reports began surfacing of Canadians being flagged, subjected to secondary screening, or even denied entry based on information discovered during these device searches. These reports suggest that the content triggering such actions can range widely. Instances have been cited where individuals faced complications allegedly due to their expressed political views found in messages or social media posts, personal opinions shared online, or even seemingly innocuous content like old memes or jokes from years prior stored on their devices. What might be considered harmless personal expression or outdated digital clutter could potentially be interpreted by border agents as grounds for suspicion or concern, leading to adverse consequences for the traveler. The most unsettling aspect of this practice for many is the profound lack of transparency surrounding these searches. There are often no clear criteria provided for why a particular individual is selected for a device search, nor is there a requirement for agents to explain what they are looking for or what specifically prompted their suspicion. This opacity makes it difficult for travelers to understand the process or anticipate potential issues. Recognizing the potential risks, the Canadian government has even taken the step of issuing warnings to its citizens traveling to the U.S. Official travel advisories now caution Canadians to expect the possibility of digital searches at the U.S. border. These warnings emphasize that such searches can occur without clear cause, and that authorities are not obligated to provide an explanation for their actions. This governmental advice underscores the seriousness and the widespread nature of the concern. The practice is not necessarily targeted at specific individuals based on prior intelligence. Rather, it appears to be a broad, invasive power that can be applied at the discretion of border agents. The personal data that individuals once assumed was private and protected is now potentially exposed to scrutiny every time they cross the border. This creates a palpable sense of fear and vulnerability for many travelers. The experience of crossing the border, once a quick and straightforward formality for most, now carries the unsettling possibility of becoming an open door for authorities to delve into the intricacies of one's digital life. There are no clear boundaries defined for these searches, and travelers have little way of knowing if, when, or how the information gathered might be used against them, either immediately or in the future. This represents a significant level of scrutiny that many Canadians never anticipated facing when visiting their closest ally and neighbor. It fundamentally changes the nature of the border crossing, transforming it from a simple journey into an experience that can feel uncomfortably like an interrogation, where one's digital footprint is subject to inspection without clear cause or recourse. The shifting climate at the U.S.-Canada border in 2025 hasn't just affected tourists and snowbirds. It has also sent ripples of concern through the academic community, leading to unprecedented warnings about travel to the United States. It wasn't solely the Canadian government expressing caution. One of the nation's most respected and influential academic organizations added its voice to the growing unease. The Canadian Association of University Teachers, CAUT, a body representing a vast network of over 72,000 professors, lecturers, researchers, and academic librarians across Canada, took the rare and significant step of issuing a formal travel advisory. This wasn't a general caution, but a specific recommendation urging its members to carefully reconsider any planned conferences, research trips, or other academic engagements within the United States. This advisory stemmed directly from accumulating reports and concerns regarding the treatment of academics at the U.S. border. The reasons cited by CAUT painted a disturbing picture: a noticeable trend of harassment directed towards academics, instances of unusually invasive questioning seemingly unrelated to standard border procedures, and unexplained detentions or prolonged secondary screenings targeting individuals traveling for scholarly purposes. The CAUT advisory highlighted particular risks for specific groups within the academic community. It explicitly warned faculty members who identified as transgender, those belonging to racialized groups, individuals known for being politically outspoken or critical on certain issues, or members of any other marginalized community, that they might face heightened scrutiny or potential difficulties when attempting to enter the U.S. This warning wasn't based on vague anxieties, but on reported experiences suggesting a pattern of differential treatment. The advisory itself was a direct call for faculty members to weigh the potential risks against the benefits of their planned U.S. travel. It urged them to consider whether attending events in cities like Boston, Chicago, or New York, common destinations for major academic conferences, was worth the potential for encountering difficulties at the border. This move by CAUT signaled a significant shift, as academic exchange and cross-border collaboration have historically been pillars of the Canada-U.S. relationship, fostering innovation and shared knowledge. The decision to issue such a warning reflects deep concerns about academic freedom and the ability of scholars to travel and engage internationally without undue interference or discriminatory treatment. The implications extended beyond individual travel anxieties. It touched upon the very fabric of international scholarly collaboration. Universities across Canada began to react. Many institutions started updating their internal travel protocols and risk assessments for U.S.-bound trips. Legal departments within universities became more involved, offering guidance and support to faculty members planning to travel south. The potential for border issues became a new factor in decisions about attending conferences, participating in research projects, or accepting visiting scholar positions in the U.S. What was once considered a routine aspect of academic life, crossing the border for professional development and collaboration, was now fraught with new considerations and potential complications. This advisory wasn't merely about the inconvenience of potential delays. It was fundamentally about protection and safety. CAUT urged its members traveling to the U.S. to take precautionary measures, such as wiping sensitive research data from their electronic devices before crossing, limiting the amount of personal information carried, and being mentally prepared for the possibility of being flagged or subjected to enhanced screening. The advisory emphasized that such flagging could occur not necessarily because of anything illicit they were carrying, but potentially based on their identity, their field of research, or their publicly known views. The fact that a major academic institution felt compelled to issue such a stark warning speaks volumes about the perceived atmosphere at the U.S. border. It suggests that the issues are not isolated incidents, but part of a broader pattern causing significant concern within a community dedicated to open inquiry and international exchange. This development indicates that the changes at the border are impacting more than just tourism and leisure. They are beginning to affect the essential flow of ideas and collaboration that has long characterized the relationship between Canadian and American academic institutions, raising serious questions about the future of this vital cross-border partnership. Amidst the explicit rule changes, increased device searches, and formal travel warnings, another subtle but significant shift is occurring: a quiet, undeclared pullback by Canadians from traveling to the United States. Sometimes the most telling indicators of a changing relationship aren't found in official pronouncements or dramatic headlines, but in the gradual collective shifts in behavior that happen almost imperceptibly behind the scenes. In 2025, evidence suggests that Canadians are, in growing numbers, choosing to forego trips to the U.S., a trend that is starting to create noticeable economic ripples in border communities and popular tourist destinations. This isn't an organized boycott or a vocal protest. It's a more nuanced phenomenon. A slow, quiet retreat driven by a confluence of the factors we've already discussed. The data provides a quantitative glimpse into this trend. As mentioned earlier regarding the 30-day rule, broader travel statistics corroborate this pullback. Early data from 2025 showed a significant 23% overall decline in Canadian visits to the U.S. compared to the previous year. While travel numbers can fluctuate due to various economic factors, the magnitude and timing of this decline strongly suggest a link to the changing border environment. Fewer Canadian cars are making the familiar journey across the border for weekend shopping trips. Fewer families are booking summer vacations at traditional U.S. destinations. Fewer individuals are making spontaneous cross-border excursions. Anecdotal evidence powerfully supports these statistics. Business owners in U.S. border towns, particularly in states like Maine and Michigan, whose economies are heavily reliant on Canadian shoppers and tourists, are reporting a tangible decrease in Canadian patronage. They speak of quieter streets, emptier stores, and a noticeable drop in revenue historically generated by visitors from the north. One motel owner in Old Orchard Beach, Maine, a popular spot for Quebecers, articulated the situation succinctly, noting an unprecedented level of cancellations specifically from Canadian clients, stating, "We're seeing cancellations we haven't seen in years, and it's all Canadians." This sentiment is echoed by tourism operators and service providers in other border regions who observe a hesitancy among their northern neighbors. The explanation often given isn't one of anger or political protest, but rather a pervasive sense of unease and uncertainty. Canadians seem increasingly unsure about what to expect at the border. They worry about the potential for lengthy delays, the possibility of invasive searches of their personal devices, the risk of being flagged for reasons they don't understand, or simply the discomfort of feeling less welcome than they once did. The simple, almost reflexive day trip for shopping, dining, or sightseeing, once a staple for many living near the border, now feels burdened by potential complications. What used to be an easy decision now involves a risk assessment. Is the trip worth the potential hassle? Is it worth the anxiety of possibly being subjected to uncomfortable questioning or scrutiny? Is it worth the risk, however small, of being denied entry or having personal information compromised? This collective hesitation, spread across millions of potential travelers, translates into a significant silent pullback. The fact that this withdrawal is happening on such a large scale, impacting diverse sectors from retail to hospitality to academic travel, is profoundly significant. It signals that something deeper within the Canada-US relationship is shifting. The implicit, unquestioned welcome that Canadians historically felt at the U.S. border, a sense of shared space and easy passage, appears to be eroding. Tour operators and travel agencies along the busy Quebec and Ontario borders are also observing this quiet trend, reporting fewer bookings for U.S. destinations and more inquiries about the current border situation. The shift is subtle because it lacks a central organizing force, yet its cumulative effect is real and measurable. It's more than just a change in travel patterns. It's a symptom of a fraying bond, a reflection of growing Canadian apprehension about the predictability and friendliness of the U.S. border experience. When everyday citizens begin to fundamentally question the ease and safety of visiting their closest neighbor, it suggests a significant alteration in the very foundation of that relationship. Perhaps one of the most troubling aspects of the evolving U.S.-Canada border situation in 2025 is the growing perception and documented instances of unequal scrutiny applied to different groups of Canadian travelers. While border security inherently involves assessment and inspection, reports and analyses suggest a disturbing pattern where the level of scrutiny faced by an individual may be disproportionately influenced by their perceived identity, rather than solely by objective risk factors. This apparent bias is contributing significantly to the feeling among some Canadians that the border is becoming a less equitable and more intimidating space. Officially, U.S. border policies are designed to be applied uniformly, focused on security threats and immigration compliance. However, the lived experiences reported by many Canadians, particularly those belonging to visible minority groups or those with specific ethnic or religious backgrounds, paint a different picture. Throughout 2025, consistent reports have emerged indicating that Canadians with Middle Eastern-sounding names, Individuals of South Asian descent, or those identifiable as Muslim, are increasingly subjected to more rigorous and invasive screening processes compared to other travelers. This heightened scrutiny can manifest in various ways: more frequent referrals to secondary inspection, longer and more probing interviews, unrelated to standard customs questions, repeated requests for device searches, and a generally more suspicious or interrogative tone from border agents. It's crucial to reiterate that this pattern is not reflected in any official, publicly stated U.S. policy. There are no government directives explicitly targeting these groups, yet the consistency of anecdotal evidence and the concerns raised by civil rights organizations suggest a de facto reality where certain identities trigger a higher level of suspicion at the border. Civil rights groups and legal advocates on both sides of the border have been actively monitoring this trend and raising serious concerns. They argue that this unequal scrutiny amounts to a form of profiling, where individuals are treated differently based on assumptions linked to their ethnicity, religion, or national origin, rather than any concrete evidence of wrongdoing. They point to the psychological toll this takes on travelers who feel singled out, stereotyped, and potentially discriminated against simply because of who they are or where their families come from. The lack of transparency exacerbates the problem. Travelers subjected to this enhanced scrutiny are rarely given an explanation for why they were selected. They are left wondering if it was random chance, a genuine security concern, or if their background played a role. This ambiguity fosters anxiety and resentment, further eroding trust in the border process. Border agents, often operating with considerable discretion, may be influenced by implicit biases or responding to broader security directives that, in practice, disproportionately affect certain communities. The questions asked during secondary screening can sometimes delve into personal beliefs, political views, religious practices, or travel history in ways that feel intrusive and unrelated to legitimate border security concerns. This differential treatment creates a stark contrast in the border crossing experience. While some Canadians may still find the process relatively smooth, others approach the border with apprehension, anticipating potential difficulties based on past experiences or the reported experiences of others within their communities. It transforms the border from a neutral checkpoint into a potentially charged encounter where one's identity might become a liability. This issue goes beyond mere inconvenience. It touches upon fundamental principles of fairness, equality, and dignity. The perception that the U.S. border applies different standards based on ethnicity or religion undermines the long-standing narrative of a friendly and open relationship between Canada and the United States. It suggests that the welcome is conditional, and that some Canadians are inherently viewed with more suspicion than others, purely based on their background. Addressing this issue is complex, involving challenges related to data collection, agent training, oversight mechanisms, and addressing implicit biases within the security apparatus. However, the persistence of these reports throughout 2025 indicates that unequal scrutiny remains a significant and deeply unsettling feature of the current U.S. border reality for a considerable number of Canadians. A particularly insidious aspect of the heightened scrutiny at the U.S.-Canada border in 2025 is the phenomenon often described as once flagged, always flagged. This refers to the experience of travelers who, after being stopped, questioned extensively, or denied entry on one occasion, often for reasons that remain unclear, find themselves subjected to repeated, heightened scrutiny on virtually every subsequent attempt to cross the border. This creates a persistent, invisible barrier that can follow individuals for years, regardless of changes in their circumstances or the lack of any actual wrongdoing. The problem stems from the way border control systems operate and retain information. When a traveler is flagged for secondary inspection, has their devices searched, or faces significant questioning, a record of this interaction is typically logged in interconnected databases used by border authorities. While the specific criteria for flagging are not public, the record itself can act as a persistent marker associated with that individual's identity, passport number, name, biometrics. Many Canadians report that after such an initial incident, their subsequent border crossings become routinely complicated. Even years later, and despite having updated passports, valid visas, if applicable, and no criminal record or discernible change in their risk profile, they find themselves consistently pulled aside for additional screening. The process becomes predictable. The initial scan of their passport triggers an alert, leading to secondary inspection, repeated questioning, and potential delays, even for routine trips. This experience is incredibly frustrating and anxiety-inducing because there appears to be no clear mechanism for clearing one's name or removing the initial flag. Travelers often have no official confirmation that they are on any kind of list, nor are they informed about the specific reason for the original flag. They are simply left to deal with the consequences, the repeated inconvenience, the feeling of being perpetually under suspicion, and the uncertainty that clouds every planned trip to the U.S. This lack of transparency and recourse is a major point of contention. Without knowing why they were initially flagged, travelers cannot address the underlying issue. Without a formal process to appeal or review their status, they are effectively stuck in a loop of enhanced scrutiny. It transforms the border crossing from a logistical step into a recurring source of stress. The Canadian government itself has acknowledged the limitations in addressing this issue. While they can offer consular assistance in certain situations, they have also warned citizens that decisions made by U.S. border authorities are generally considered final and are not subject to appeal through Canadian channels. They advise travelers that the reasons for denial of entry or enhanced screening are often not disclosed by U.S. officials. For those caught in this once flagged, always flagged cycle, the border ceases to feel like a simple boundary line and more like a place governed by an opaque system with a long memory. It doesn't matter if the initial stop was due to a misunderstanding, a random check that escalated, or even a case of mistaken identity. The digital record persists. This phenomenon isn't just about bureaucratic inefficiency. It represents a constant state of surveillance for those affected. Every trip requires bracing for potential delays and intrusive questioning. It erodes the sense of freedom and ease traditionally associated with U.S. travel. It makes planning trips difficult and can even deter individuals from traveling altogether, impacting personal relationships, business opportunities, and academic pursuits. This reality highlights a significant power imbalance at the border, where the traveler has little agency once marked by the system. What might have been a single, perhaps arbitrary incident can cast a long shadow, turning future border crossings into a reminder of being perceived as a potential risk, even without any substantiating evidence. It's a heavy, unsettling burden, and for an increasing number of Canadians in 2025, it has become an unavoidable part of the new reality of engaging with the U.S. border. As we've examined the various facets of the changing U.S.-Canada border landscape in 2025, a complex and somewhat somber picture emerges. The United States-Canada border, long celebrated as the world's longest undefended border and a symbol of close partnership, is undeniably undergoing a transformation, and not necessarily one that fosters the traditional sense of ease and mutual trust. The seamless, friendly crossings that many Canadians took for granted for decades seem to be receding into the past, replaced by a more formalized, scrutinized, and for some, intimidating experience. Several key trends define this shift. We've seen the introduction of stricter stay limitations, like the 30-day rule, which caught many, especially Snowbirds, by surprise and necessitates proactive online registration for longer visits, ending the era of automatic 6-month stays. This alone signals a move towards treating Canadians more like standard international visitors rather than neighbors with special status. Furthermore, the rise of invasive searches of personal electronic devices, phones, laptops, tablets, without the need for warrants represents a significant intrusion into personal privacy. The fact that refusal is not a viable option and that content found, even old or innocuous material, can lead to denial of entry has created a chilling effect and understandable anxiety among travelers. Compounding these concerns are the explicit travel warnings issued by bodies like the Canadian government and the Canadian Association of University Teachers. The CAUT advisory, specifically cautioning academics, particularly those from marginalized or outspoken groups, about potential harassment and detention, underscores that these are not isolated incidents, but perceived systemic risks affecting even professional and scholarly travel. This leads to the observable phenomenon of the silent pullback, a measurable decline in Canadians traveling to the U.S., driven not by overt protest, but by a growing collective unease, uncertainty about border procedures, and a diminishing feeling of being welcome. This trend is impacting economies in border towns and subtly altering long-standing travel patterns. Perhaps most concerning is the evidence of unequal scrutiny, where Canadians from specific ethnic or religious backgrounds report facing disproportionately harsh treatment, longer detentions, and more invasive questioning, suggesting profiling practices, even if not officially sanctioned. This erodes the principle of fair treatment and fuels feelings of discrimination. Finally, the persistent nature of being flagged, the once flagged, always flagged reality, means that a single negative encounter, often unexplained, can lead to a lifetime of heightened scrutiny and anxiety at the border, with little to no recourse for the affected individual. Taken together, these developments paint a picture of a border relationship that is becoming more strained, less predictable, and less open than it once was. The automatic, unquestioned welcome seems to be fading, replaced by a system characterized by increased surveillance, stricter enforcement, potential biases, and lingering uncertainty. While the need for border security is understood, the current methods and the atmosphere they create are clearly impacting the relationship on multiple levels, from individual travel decisions to academic collaboration and the overall psychological sense of partnership between the two nations. The real question remains: is this the new permanent reality, or a temporary phase? And what does it ultimately signify about the future trajectory of the unique bond between Canada and the United States? Only time will fully tell. But for now, the experience at the U.S. border feels fundamentally different for many Canadians. Thank you for joining us on our channel for this important discussion. U.S.-Canada border. Travel warning. Border security. Recent changes and increased scrutiny at the U.S.-Canada border are making travel more complex and concerning for Canadians, impacting everything from stays to privacy. At News. Politics. Canada. USA. Border. Travel. Immigration. Security. Snowbirds. Privacy. Fun. Info fact. YouTube titles. 1. 7. Alarming signs. Why Canadians feel unwelcome at the U.S. border. Now. Travel changes and security. 2. U.S. border crackdown. 5 reasons Canadians are rethinking travel south. New rules and searches. 3. Once flagged, always flagged. The scary new reality at the U.S.-Canada border. 6. Troubling trends. 4. 30-day surprise and phone searches. Is the U.S. closing the door on Canadians? Border Update, 2025. 5. Academic warning. Issued. 7 reasons why U.S. travel is risky for some Canadians. Border scrutiny. Tags. U.S.-Canada border, Canadian travel, border security, U.S. immigration, travel warning, Snowbirds, device searches, CAUT, border crossing changes, privacy concerns, fun info fact. Clickbait phrases. 1. They searched my phone at the border. You won't believe what happened next. 2. Banned from the U.S. for this. The secret reason Canadians are being turned away. 3. Your vacation plans could be ruined. The border rule. No one is talking about. 20 image prompts. 1. A lone Canadian flag car driving towards a stern-looking U.S. border crossing booth under cloudy skies. 2. Close-up of a fingerprint scanner at a border checkpoint. 3. Stylized image of a smartphone screen displaying personal messages being examined by a gloved hand, border agent. 4. Split image. One side showing a sunny Florida beach, past. The other side showing a complex online visa form, present. 5. An elderly couple, Snowbirds, looking worriedly at a calendar marked with only 30 days. 6. Silhouette of a person handing over a laptop to a border agent. 7. Graphic showing a decreasing bar chart representing Canadian travel to the U.S. 8. A university professor looking stressed while packing. A travel advisory document visible. 9. Map of North America with a thick, imposing line representing the U.S.-Canada border, replacing the previously faded line. 10. Abstract image representing digital data. Binary code, photos, being scanned or analyzed. 11. Group of diverse individuals looking apprehensive in a secondary inspection waiting area at the border. 12. Close-up of a U.S. Customs and Border Protection badge. 13. Empty storefronts in a U.S. border town, usually bustling with Canadian shoppers. 14. A Canadian passport being stamped with a very short duration of stay. 15. Conceptual image. A person trapped behind digital bars representing an invisible border flag. 16. A road sign pointing towards the USA, but with a warning symbol superimposed. 17. Overhead shot of cars in a long queue at a border crossing, looking slow and tense. 18. Illustration depicting a magnifying glass hovering over a person's identity documents at the border. 19. A split screen showing a welcoming handshake, past, versus a security camera monitoring a traveler, present. 20. Wide shot of the Peace Arch border crossing, but with a darker, more ominous filter applied.